It didn't end in battle. It didn't fail in flight. It was grounded by paperwork. The F-14 Tomcat wasn't just a jet. It was a declaration. $38 million of titanium, computers, and courage. The kind of machine America used to build when we weren't afraid of risk. It could climb faster than missiles, twist harder than gravity, hold the sky like it belonged there. It was the jet. But in the end, it wasn't the Soviets who grounded it. It was Washington. The same hands that built it signed its retirement. This is the story of the last fighter America built with courage, the $38 million legend that politics ended. Early 1960s. Cold War intensity reaching peak. Soviet Union developing supersonic bombers. Long-range missiles. The kind of threats that could sink aircraft carriers before fighters could intercept. American naval aviation faced existential problem. How do you defend a carrier battle group against multiple supersonic threats attacking simultaneously from beyond visual range? The existing fighters weren't designed for this. F-4 Phantom was capable but limited. Single-target engagement, visual range combat, great for dogfighting, insufficient for coordinated bomber attacks. The Navy needed something revolutionary, not just better, different, a fighter that could engage multiple targets simultaneously at long range, before the enemy even knew you were there. 1968. VFX program launched. Variable fighter experimental. Navy specification was demanding. Defend the carrier against all airborne threats. Bombers, missiles, multiple targets, long range. All weather, day and night. Speed wasn't enough. Firepower wasn't enough. The fighter needed intelligence, situational awareness, the ability to track and engage 6 targets before they could respond. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation submitted proposal. Experienced naval aviation contractor. History of building carrier-capable aircraft. The Hellcat. The Intruder. Everything that gave Navy pilots confidence. Grumman understood carrier operations, understood what worked at sea, what survived salt and stress and violent launches from catapults. The proposal was ambitious. Variable sweep wings. Adapting geometry for different flight regimes. Swept back for high speed. Extended for slow-speed carrier approaches. The complexity was enormous. Moving wings meant hydraulics, mechanisms, weight, maintenance, everything that made aircraft fragile. But it enabled performance impossible with fixed wings. Speed and agility, power and control, twin engines, redundancy. Survive battle damage, lose one engine and still make it home. The kind of safety that mattered when flying over ocean, when the nearest runway was a pitching carrier deck in rough seas, when getting home wasn't guaranteed but had to be possible. Advanced radar, AWG-9, track 24 targets simultaneously. Engage 6. The Phoenix missile system. Launch. From 50 miles away. Fire and forget. 6 missiles toward 6 bombers. Defend the entire battle group with 1 fighter. The capability that changed naval aviation. Made 1 Tomcat worth 6 conventional fighters. Grumman won the contract. 1969. Project began. Engineers working impossible hours, sleeping under desks. The urgency was real. Soviet bomber threat was growing. Every month of delay was vulnerability. Every problem requiring immediate solution. The kind of engineering that happened when mission mattered more than comfort. When building the best was the only acceptable standard. The challenges were massive. Variable sweep wings had never been done at this scale. The mechanisms had to be perfect. Any failure meant losing the aircraft, losing the pilot, the hydraulics, the pivots, the wing-locking mechanisms. Everything tested to destruction, rebuilt, tested again. the kind of development that required accepting failures on the path to success. The engines were powerful. Pratt & Whitney TF-30, afterburning turbofans, producing enough thrust to push 33 tons of fighter to Mach 2.3. But the TF-30 had problems: compressor stalls, engine failures, the kind of issues that endangered test pilots, that required years of refinement, that made every flight dangerous until solutions were found. December 1970. First flight, Edwards Air Force Base. Test pilot Bob Smith. The Tomcat lifted off. Variable sweep wings working. Engines producing thrust. Everything functioning as designed. The flight was short, cautious, but successful. Proof that the concept worked. The Grumman had created something unprecedented. The development continued. More test flights, more problems discovered, more solutions implemented. The TF-30 engines remained problematic. But gradually the Tomcat became reliable, became capable, became what the Navy needed, the fighter that could defend carriers against any threat. 1974, operational deployment, VF-1 and VF-2 squadrons, USS Enterprise. The Tomcat joined the fleet, not as experimental aircraft, as frontline fighter, the defender of carrier battle groups, the jet that changed naval aviation. Pilots called it the Cadillac of the sky, not because it was comfortable, because it was capable, powerful, the kind of aircraft that made you feel invincible, that gave you confidence against any threat, that made carrier operations feel less dangerous because you knew the Tomcat was watching, waiting, ready to engage anything that approached. The specifications were remarkable. Maximum speed Mach 2.34, 1,500 miles per hour, range over 1,600 miles, service ceiling above 50,000 feet, the performance that matched land-based fighters, that exceeded most, all from carrier-capable aircraft that could land on pitching decks in rough seas. The engineering achievement that proved naval aviation could match any air force. But the Phoenix missile system was revolutionary. AM-54 Phoenix, range over 100 miles, active radar homing, fire 6 simultaneously, track and engage 6 bombers before they reached missile launch range, defend the entire battle group with 1 fighter and 6 missiles. The capability that justified the Tomcat's complexity and cost. The radar was extraordinary. AWG-9 could track while scanning, engage multiple targets, provide situational awareness that gave Tomcat pilots information no other fighter possessed, see everything, engage anything, control the battle space before enemies knew combat had started. It wasn't just a plane, it was a promise that America could still outbuild anyone, that our engineers could solve impossible problems, that our pilots would have the best equipment possible, that defending the fleet mattered more than budget constraints, that excellence was achievable when excellence was demanded. And for a moment, we remembered who we were. Wow, 1981. Gulf of Sidra, Libyan airspace. 2 F-14 Tomcats from VF-41 on patrol. Routine combat air patrol mission, defending the carrier battle group, standard operations. 2 Libyan Su-22s approached. Soviet-built fighters, aggressive intentions. The Tomcats maneuvered, defensive, professional, trying to avoid engagement. But the Libyans fired. Atoll missile, missed. Combat was initiated, not by choice, by necessity. The Tomcat pilots responded. IM-9L Sidewinder missiles. Both Su-22s shot down. Combat lasted under a minute. 2 veteran Navy pilots against 2 aggressive adversaries. The Tomcat's superiority was absolute, not close, overwhelming, the kind of performance that proved the aircraft's capability in actual combat. The world noticed. The Tomcat wasn't theoretical anymore, wasn't experimental, was proven, combat-tested, the fighter that had engaged Soviet aircraft and dominated completely. The message to adversaries was clear. Approaching American carriers was dangerous. The Tomcat made it extremely dangerous. Pilots who flew the Tomcat loved it. Not the superficial affection for machinery, real trust. The kind that came from knowing your aircraft was superior, that it would perform when needed, that it gave you advantages enemies didn't have, the confidence that meant everything in combat, that made dangerous missions survivable. The variable sweep wings were extraordinary in practice, swept forward for carrier approaches, slow speed, high lift, stable landing on pitching deck, then swept back for combat. High speed, low drag, maximum performance. The versatility that made one aircraft capable in every flight regime, from slow carrier operations to supersonic intercepts. The engineering that worked exactly as designed. The Tomcat became cultural icon, not through marketing, through presence. Carriers deploying worldwide with Tomcats on deck. The distinctive silhouette, twin tails, variable wings, the aircraft that represented American naval power. That made adversaries reconsider hostile actions. That reminded allies America was committed to defending international waters. Kids built model kits, posters on bedroom walls, not because of movies, because the Tomcat represented something. Power, capability, the belief that America built the best, that our technology was superior, that excellence was achievable and worth pursuing, the kind of inspiration that created next generation of engineers and pilots. It was the sound of freedom breaking the sound barrier, the roar of twin turbofans at full afterburner, the sonic boom of Mach 2 flight, the mechanical thunder that announced American presence. That made allies confident and adversaries cautious. That represented everything naval aviation was supposed to be. Fast, powerful, capable, unstoppable. But power comes at a price, and this jet would cost more than anyone imagined. 1980s. Defense budget debates intensifying. Cold War was expensive. Every weapon system scrutinized. Every program evaluated. Congress demanding efficiency, accountability, proof that spending was justified. The F-14 Tomcat was expensive. $38 million per aircraft, $1980, equivalent to over $130 million today. The kind of cost that generated attention, criticism, demands for justification. Maintenance was intensive. Variable sweep wings required constant inspection. Hydraulic systems, wing mechanisms, everything that moved needed maintenance. Salt water corrosion. Carrier operations were brutal on aircraft. Violent launches, arrested landings. The stress that required continuous maintenance to keep aircraft operational. The TF-30 engines remained problematic. Compressor stalls, reliability issues. Engine replacements were common, expensive, time-consuming. The kind of maintenance burden that reduced aircraft availability, that frustrated commanders needing fighters for missions, that generated criticism from budget analysts looking for problems. Congressional hearings began, Defense Appropriations Committees questioning Navy leadership. Why does the F-14 cost so much? Why is maintenance so intensive? Why can't the Navy operate more efficiently? The questions weren't about capability, were about cost, about finding programs to cut when budget reductions were demanded. Competitors were lobbying. McDonnell Douglas promoting the F-18 Hornet, newer design, simpler, less expensive, more reliable. The aircraft that could perform most Tomcat missions at lower cost. The kind of alternative that appealed to budget-conscious politicians. That made the Tomcat seem unnecessarily expensive. The comparisons were misleading. The F-18 couldn't match Tomcat performance. Shorter range, lower speed, less powerful radar, couldn't carry Phoenix missiles. The capabilities that made the Tomcat unique were being dismissed as unnecessary. Excessive, as wasteful spending during peacetime. Pentagon leadership started questioning the Tomcat. Too complex, too expensive, too difficult to maintain. The aircraft that had proven itself in combat was being criticized for characteristics inherent to its design. The variable sweep wings that provided versatility were maintenance burdens. The powerful radar that enabled multiple target engagement was expensive complexity. Everything that made the Tomcat superior was being characterized as problematic. Political pressure intensified. Senators from districts with McDonnell-Douglas contracts promoting the F-18, jobs in their states, campaign contributions, the kind of politics that influenced defense procurement more than tactical requirements. That made budget decisions based on economics rather than capability. Navy leadership resisted initially, argued the Tomcat provided capabilities the F-18 couldn't. Fleet defense required long-range intercept, Phoenix missiles, AWG-9 radar. The missions that justified the Tomcat's existence required the Tomcat's capabilities. Simpler alternatives couldn't defend carriers against coordinated bomber attacks. But the pressure continued. Budget cuts were mandatory. Programs had to be eliminated. The choice wasn't between Tomcat and nothing. It was between Tomcat and F-18, between expensive excellence and affordable adequacy. The kind of decision that revealed changing priorities. That showed what America valued, what we were willing to sacrifice. 1991. Decision made. F-14 production would end. No new aircraft. Existing fleet would serve until replacement. The F-18 would become primary naval fighter. Not because it was better, because it was cheaper, because Congress had decided adequate was sufficient. That defending carriers didn't require the best, required the affordable. The Tomcat community was devastated. Pilots who trusted their aircraft, maintainers who kept them flying, everyone who understood what made the Tomcat special. Watching the decision to eliminate not just aircraft but capability. Philosophy, the belief that America should build the best regardless of cost. It didn't end in battle. It was stopped by meetings, by PowerPoint presentations, by budget spreadsheets that measured cost but not value, by politicians who understood accounting but not combat, by the slow bureaucratic process that eliminated excellence in favor of efficiency. But what we lost wasn't just a plane. It was something deeper, something in ourselves. 2006. Naval Air Station Oceana, Virginia Beach, September 22nd. The last F-14 Tomcat flight. VF-31 Tomcatters. Final combat deployment completed. Aircraft returning to be decommissioned, scrapped, destroyed to prevent parts from reaching Iran, the only other country that operated Tomcats. American aircraft being destroyed to prevent American technology from being used against America. The ceremony was somber. Pilots who'd flown Tomcats their entire careers, maintainers who'd kept them operational through decades, everyone who'd been part of the Tomcat community. Watching the end, understanding that more than aircraft was being retired. An era was ending. Philosophy was being abandoned. The final Tomcat launched. Afterburners ignited. Twin plumes of fire. The roar that had announced American power for 32 years. The sound that had protected carriers, intimidated adversaries, inspired allies, echoing one last time across the flight line, then fading, growing distant, disappearing. When the engine shut down, an era went with them. The same generation that built Apollo was retiring. Engineers who'd solved impossible problems. pilots who'd pushed aircraft to limits, maintainers who'd kept complex systems operational, everyone who'd made the Tomcat successful. Moving on, being replaced by people who'd never known what America could build when we weren't afraid of complexity, when we prioritized capability over cost, when excellence was the standard. The Cold War was over. Soviet Union had collapsed. The threat that justified the Tomcat no longer existed. But threats don't disappear. They evolve, change. The world remained dangerous. Carriers still needed defense. But America had decided adequate defense was sufficient, that the Tomcat's capabilities were excessive for modern threats, that cheaper alternatives would suffice. We used to build to win. Now we build to comply. With budgets, regulations, political pressures, everything that prevents building the best, that makes excellence financially irresponsible, that prioritizes efficiency over capability. The cultural shift that happened gradually, that became complete with Tomcat retirement. The F-14 wasn't just retired. Courage was. The courage to build complex systems that might fail, to accept risk in pursuit of excellence, to prioritize mission over cost, to believe American warriors deserve the absolute best equipment possible, regardless of price. That courage disappeared, replaced by risk aversion, budget consciousness, the belief that adequate was responsible and excellence was wasteful. Carriers still launch fighters. F-18 Super Hornets, capable aircraft, reliable, affordable, everything politicians wanted, everything budget analysts demanded. But they're not Tomcats, don't have the range, the speed, the radar capability, can't engage 6 targets simultaneously at 100 miles. The capabilities that made carrier battle groups confident are gone, replaced by adequate alternatives that do most missions acceptably. That sound never came back. The roar of TF-30 engines at full afterburner, the sonic boom of Mach 2 flight, the mechanical thunder of Tomcats launching on combat air patrol, the sound that meant the fleet was protected, that America's best were watching, that excellence was operational. Silent now, replaced by quieter engines, smaller aircraft, adequate performance. We didn't lose the Cold War's last jet. We lost the will to fly that high again, lost the belief that some missions justify any cost, that defending our people requires the best equipment possible, that excellence has value beyond accounting, that courage means building what's necessary regardless of whether it's affordable. But something survived. You can still find them, the men who flew her, veterans gathering at reunions, sharing stories, remembering missions they still can't discuss fully. The feeling of Tomcat at full power, variable sweep wings transitioning, UG-9 radar tracking multiple targets, Phoenix missiles ready, the confidence that came from flying the best. Museum Tomcats are being preserved, restored, not just displayed, maintained as if they could fly again, veterans working voluntarily, keeping systems operational, hydraulics functional, engines preserved, not because they have to, because they can't let her fade, can't accept that the Tomcat is just history, memory, something that existed but doesn't anymore. Kids still visit museums, stand beneath Tomcats, ask questions. How fast was it? How many missiles? Why don't we fly them anymore? The questions reveal what's missing. The belief that America builds the best, that our military operates the finest equipment, that excellence is standard rather than exception. The questions adults struggle to answer, because explaining why we stopped building greatness is harder than explaining how greatness was achieved. New fighters are faster, more advanced, stealth technology, better avionics, everything improved through decades of development. The F-35, the F-22, Remarkable aircraft, technological marvels, everything modern aerospace engineering can achieve. But none have her soul. The Tomcat represented something beyond technology, represented courage, the willingness to build complex systems, to accept risk, to prioritize mission over cost. That spirit doesn't exist in modern procurement, in risk-averse development, in budget-constrained programs. She was built with courage, and courage doesn't age, doesn't become obsolete, remains relevant regardless of technology advances. The courage to attempt what hasn't been done, to solve impossible problems, to build the best even when critics question the cost. That courage is timeless, needs to be recovered, remembered, restored to American aerospace development. Iran still flies Tomcats. 79 aircraft delivered before revolution. Some remain operational, maintained through ingenuity, scavenged parts, indigenous development. The irony is profound. America destroyed hundreds of Tomcats to prevent Iran from obtaining parts. But Iran kept theirs flying, valued them enough to overcome every obstacle, while America declared them too expensive, too complex, too difficult to maintain. The country that built them couldn't keep them. The country that bought them did. Maybe we can't rebuild the Tomcat. The production lines are gone, the tooling destroyed, the engineers retired. Everything that made the Tomcat possible exists only in memory, in museums, in stories veterans tell. But we can rebuild what she stood for. The belief in building boldly, in accepting risk, in pursuing excellence, in valuing capability over cost, in understanding that defending our people requires the best we can build regardless of budget constraints. To build boldly, to risk again, to believe again. That's what the Tomcat teaches, not through specifications, not through performance data, through philosophy. The understanding that great nations build great things, that excellence requires courage, that protecting what matters justifies whatever it costs, that America at its best doesn't ask if we can afford to build the best, asks if we can afford not to. The roar stopped. But if you listen close, you can still hear it. The sound of America refusing to go quietly, of engineers solving impossible problems, of pilots trusting their aircraft completely, of a nation that believed excellence was achievable, that courage was valuable, that defending our people required the best we could build. The sound that needs to return, that must return if America is to remain what it was, what it should be, what it must be. The F-14 Tomcat, $38 million legend, 32 years defending carriers, 0 losses to enemy aircraft, perfect combat record, retired not because it failed, but because we lost the courage to keep it. It didn't end in battle. It didn't fail in flight. It failed in faith. Our faith that excellence was worth the cost, that courage was valuable, that America should build the best. The Tomcat is history. But history teaches, shows what we achieved when we believed, what we could achieve again if we recovered that belief, if we stopped accepting adequate, started demanding excellence, stopped managing budgets, started building greatness. The engines are cold, the mission's complete, the legend grounded, but the spirit survives. In everyone who refuses to accept good enough, who believes excellence matters, who understands courage enables achievement, who knows America at its best builds the best. The Tomcat flew for 32 years, defended carriers worldwide, intimidated adversaries, inspired allies, proved American engineering superiority. Then politics ended it. But legends don't fade. They wait for the moment when courage returns, when excellence matters again, when America remembers what we used to build, what we must build, What we will build when we recover what the Tomcat represented. $38 million of courage, grounded by paperwork, remembered by everyone who understands what was lost. The sound of America when we weren't afraid to fly that high.